in this flexible framework, a couple of things I want to emphasize. First, again, teachers can't do it alone. And that this framework, this is not a program. You know, you're not buying Wilson Reading. In fact, you're not buying anything. I'm giving it to you right now. It's not a program, it's a process. It's a way to think. It's a way to work to get to here. It's a way to think about the elements of the school. And so that allows it then, rather than saying to a school, you have to be a certain way, allows each and every school in its own unique way to identify the shifts and changes it might want to do and how it's going to do them. All the framework is going to do is to remind you that you're covering all the bases. That if I'm doing something here in a classroom, that my policies, procedures, and protocols are aligned with that and consistent with that. Right? And lastly, this creation of a context works for all students in the school. What student couldn't use a safer place? What student couldn't use more connection? What student wouldn't benefit from our knowing that student and understanding them as the whole child in all four of the domains, rather than just as an academic learner? Infrastructure and culture. First thing in a school, if you're looking to become trauma sensitive and you're looking to bring those attributes in as how you operate in terms of your norms and values, you need senior staff to buy in. Administration's got to be on board. And I know when I talk to teachers, this is always the moment. And I always say to teachers, you know, it's not as effective as whole school, but you can also be thinking in terms of whole classroom. Because classroom is a sub-community within the school. The point is the leader of that community, and in this case we're talking schools, the principal, they need to buy in. And once they have, how do we weave trauma-sensitive approaches into the fabric of the school? You know, we had a school we worked with, and communication was the identified piece. In fact, I made this presentation, principal gets together with the staff and said, so what do you think? And staff was fairly aggressive to this principal. You want us to work with kids impacted by traumatic experience, yet you don't give us the information. Well, do you have an example? I do. Yesterday, Johnny Jones did not have his homework, and I gave him what for his homework. Because he can do it, and he does it half the time, and I'm working with him to get that percentage up. Then I find out later in the day that the night before, the police were at his house for domestic violence call till about 9:30. You knew that, I didn't. I would have approached that completely differently than the way I did if I had that information. And the school says, the counselor said, that's confidential, I can't give you that information. I found that information out from DCF, Department of Children and Families, right? I can't give you that information. Yeah, but if we don't have that information, well, and they went round and round. And they reached a decision. They reached actually a conclusion. And it worked for them. And the conclusion was that when someone knew something was going on with a child, they had this red sheet of paper that they would put in a red envelope. They eventually got rid of the red envelopes because the red could be done with the paper and the stapling of the paper. But they would put it in a red envelope, and the piece of paper had the child's name, first name, last initial, the person in the school who had more information, if the teacher wanted to pursue that, and that red envelope went to every teacher who saw that child, including specialists. And the teachers liked that because a lot of times, frankly, I don't really want to know the story. And it put them on alert that, this child, right? Okay, doesn't have his homework, how am I going to approach that? And so that communication allowed them to begin to understand, begin to alter how they would interact with kids. Because what happened over time is I gave them the what for the homework, and then they would change that with certain kids, and they realized that as they changed that in a way that was more trauma sensitive, that actually worked better, getting homework done with most of their kids, than the what for because the homework wasn't in. And so that piece of communication, that resolution they reached, which was unique and specific to that school. I really want to emphasize that. A lot of people hear this and they go, oh great, I'm going to go, they call this the red envelope. I'm going to go do the red envelope. Does it really fit your school? Does it fit the culture in your school? Is it something that's going to work? Is it something you even think you should do in your school? The point is is that you begin to weave it into your school in a way that makes sense for you. Then identifying barriers and addressing barriers. And to me, one of the key barriers here is the need of the one against the need of the many. Where's that balance? I can't tell you where that balance is, but I think a discussion in your school can help you understand where that balance is. Additionally, this stuff, as we would say in Boston, is wicked hard. It is. This is hard work. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 5 steps back. Sometimes you go home going, what am I having any impact? Other days you go home going, yahoo, what a great day. Right? This is hard. And because it's hard, again, whole school, not just teachers. We need to work together, not just brainstorming ideas and innovation, but work together. We're here for each other. We're all working this. We all feel that, we all feel that, yay, right? Our kids. I'm a firm believer that our public schools have some of the best trained, most knowledgeable people, educators in the world. And I would challenge anyone on that. Now, I may be a little biased because I happen to be one of them, but I truly feel that. And I think that if we can give them the information, provide a way for them to understand the impacts of trauma on learning, that is really the first step. And then beyond that, rather than my telling you what your school or what a school should have for professional development, let them decide. Gee, we need a little more work on collaborative problem solving because we want to adopt that as our social skill development curriculum. Right? So, professional development. Staff-driven, based on an understanding and initial training and understanding about the impacts of trauma on students. Linking with mental health, and mental health both in the community as well as in the school. And you'll notice here I start with clinical supports for staff, you know, the wicked hard thing. Sometimes just being able to take all the PC language out and sit with someone and say, here's what I'm feeling, here's where I'm frustrated, here's where I think we're going and it's scaring me, and how are we going to get there? And to do that in a way that's not part of my evaluation, to do that in a way that's not going to impact my professional standing, to do that in a way that is constructive. Let's get that out so we can figure out where to go. It can be extraordinarily helpful. As well as ongoing support. You know, I worked with this kid. I picked him up in middle school, and he was with me in high school. And he came in one morning and just told me to F off. And I know him pretty well, and I was a little ego involved with him because he was really doing pretty well. And you can't say that, you know, in school. And I said, well, that's inappropriate, but I understand you might have a bad day. Why don't we hit the reset button and try it again? He said, I'm not hitting the F and reset button. Go F yourself. So, well, I guess we're not hitting the reset button now, are we? So I said, come with me. We're going to go to the next room. We're going to work this out. I'm not effing going anywhere. So I look at the rest of the students in the class and said, would you mind going next door? And they were like, we're out of here. They were gone. They couldn't get out fast enough. And we sat there. He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. After about 10 minutes, he said, I'm really sorry, Joe. I'm sorry. In fact, I still see this student on occasion. He works in a gas station where I drop by once in a while to say hi. And one of the first things he'll still say to me is, you know, I really want to apologize for that day at school. It's like, can you let that go? In another 2 years, I'll be so old, I won't even remember it, right? But he has no idea, you know, what was causing that? I don't know. And he really didn't know. And he felt bad, but we spent some time, he got through it, he's off to class, right? You ready to go? Yeah. Now he goes off to class, I'm a mess. He comes in, he tells me to go F myself, and he's off to class, and like, well, what am I doing? I go down, I gotta go see Faye, the social worker. So Faye, are we done now, Joe? Yeah. Okay, well, stop feeling sorry for yourself, because this is the way he is. This is who he is. It's not about you, it's about him. And the fact that he could recover and go back to class, could he have done that 2 years ago? No. Well, okay, so your interventions are successful, so pull it together, stop feeling bad for yourself, can you go back to class, right? I said, yeah, I can. of course, I never thought about, so who's with Faye after she puts me together? But the point is that there was a colleague I could go to in a very short period of time could put me back together. I needed that. Yeah, I would have gotten through the day without that, but you know I'd have taken some kid's head off who really didn't deserve it. I would have been way over, right? Oftentimes, we also serve as the connection between community mental health resources and families and students. Do you know is there a therapist that? I got a whole Rolodex. You want me to come pick you up? I used to love those calls from parents and requests from kids. And then the other piece, I think that where mental health can play a big piece is working with families. Because a lot of times the acorns don't fall far from the tree. And it can be hard, but it's important. It's an important piece. How do we do that? And I called this parent once and identified myself, and before I can say another word, she said, "What's the little bastard done now?" Quote, unquote. High school kid, 10th grader. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm thinking, oh, this child. But then, of course, I started to blush because I'd screwed up. Why was I calling her? Was I calling her to say, hey, he got 100 on his test today? No, he'd screwed up. And she was sending me a very clear message when I thought about it, right? And in discussion with colleagues, it was, this is a student who we're going to have some crisis with. So let's build relationship to deal with crisis rather than try to build relationship in the midst of crisis. So I started calling her weekly, actually probably every week and a half, to be honest. I tried weekly, but it gets busy. And I was telling her the good, the bad, and the ugly. Here's what he did well. Here's what we're working on. Here's where he struggled. But overall, he's doing great. I don't think she ever said that to him. I hear you doing great. But I didn't care. She heard it. I will also tell you that every time I called, she got to recognize my voice, and she would use that same greeting. Hi, Joe. What's that little bastard done now? And I'd say he's done some pretty good stuff. And so she would kind of grab me, and that became the relationship, but it worked. If that's the way she wanted to be, I had the support. There were days when I really ticked me off, but it is what it is. Focused on the child.